Welcome to VikeFans.com's exclusive series, Jay's All-Out-Blitz, a look inside the key challenges and issues facing NFL players and the Minnesota Vikings in 2013. And now, your host, former NFL linebacker Jay Foreman.
Hello everyone, and welcome to our regular season opening edition of Jay Foreman's All-Out-Blitz series. I'm Tom Moore, better known to most of you as Purple Pain. I'm joined by former NFL linebacker Jay Foreman, and we're both excited about playing games that count for something and being able to see the best players in the game for a full 60 minutes. Now, Jay, last week you hit the nail on the head when you predicted both Joe Webb would make the team as a receiver and Zach Line would make the team as a fullback. But the Vikings also kept an unusually high 8 linebackers and 10 defensive backs. To you, were there any real surprises on the final roster moves by the Vikings on cutdown day?
Well, yeah, I mean, you mentioned it right there. The 8 linebackers, when the Vikings play a 4-3, is essentially unheard of. That's how many you keep using when you play a 3-4. What I think the Vikings were thinking is that they have a lot of young guys that were coming off injuries, and Minnesota, in particular from Penn State, where he can develop into a starter and a great player, that they had to save at least one more roster spot. And then also they know that they all can play well on special teams. And then ultimately, that's going to make their team better. When you have linebackers that can perform well on special teams, that's going to make your team overall a better team.
What about the 10 defensive backs? Does that seem like a high number, or is that normal for the NFL these days?
It's a little high. Usually you max out around 9 and then have 1 or 2 guys maybe on practice squad, but they kept 10, and just like they kept a lot for playing linebacker. So what I think it comes down to is a lot of those guys that aren't starting performed well on special teams. And when you have guys that are backups that are willing to perform well on special teams, that also can perform well on the defensive side of the ball, you have to make some concessions to keep them. Now, where that might hurt them a little bit is on the defensive front, so they got to make sure they stay healthy to get max production out of their backups in the defensive front four moving forward throughout the season, because they've kept a little bit more on the back end of their defense.
Leslie Frazier came out this week and he announced Marvin Mitchell was going to start at the weak side linebacker spot over Desmond Bishop. Any surprise there?
That's a big surprise, considering the way that Desmond Bishop has played on the last 2 games, in particular in the preseason. You can see he got better and better each game. They signed him for a reason. Marvin Mitchell is, he's an established player, but he's more of a stopgap starter than a special teams dynamo. So it'll be interesting to see how they rotate players, or if they do or they don't rotate them at all and just let Marvin Mitchell go. It'll be interesting to see where Desmond Bishop really fits in. But then also, the Vikings might know something that we as fans and as commentators and analysts really don't know. Maybe he needs a week or 2 to get to, 100% full strength, and Marvin Mitchell can go in and hold the fort down until then. But I was very surprised about that. I think it may be more of a longevity in the program, maybe knowing the defensive scheme a little bit better. But I think by the middle of the season, I would envision Desmond Bishop being in there.
Well, with a regular season or opener in Detroit on Sunday at Ford Field, can you tell us what a typical week of preparation looks like for an NFL game when you're a player?
Well, at the beginning of the season, it's almost like a bye week, so you get an extra practice or 2 after you cut down to your final 53 on Monday, and maybe sometimes teams have a little walkthrough and a light practice on Sunday. Then Tuesday's a mandatory day off per league rules, and then Wednesday and Thursday are usually your hard, we used to call them grunt days. Those are the days that, the meetings are longer. That's when you're installing the game plan on both days to get the game plan in. And then Friday is a brush-up day where essentially it is your last practice. It's a little bit shorter practice. You do a lot more situations, less time in group work. The coaches don't really coach as much because they want you to be out there and get the game feel to where the players have to work it out. So Friday is a very important practice. And when you talk to a lot of coaches and GMs when they evaluate practice during the week, they will tell you 2 things. One, practice doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to play well, but everybody wants to have that good feeling going into the game on Sunday. But then 2, Friday's practice is probably the most important because of the communication of the players out there working together, and the coaches are really taking a step back and letting the players go out there and play the game.
And then once the Vikings actually arrive in Detroit on Saturday, what will they do when they get there, and how are rooming assignments determined, and will the players have a curfew?
This is a team-by-team thing. If you're a veteran, usually on most teams throughout the NFL, you're able to room by yourself. So that's obviously a perk once you get over 4 years, which is obviously vested in the NFL. But if you're a younger guy, usually they pair up guys that are either in the same position group or guys that have became friends throughout the off-season workouts. So usually those two guys room together. But once you arrive in Detroit, it's a short flight, so the Vikings will probably leave sometime mid to late afternoon, arrive around 3 or 4, probably arrive at the hotel around 4:30. They'll have a pregame meal anywhere from 5:30 to 7 o'clock, and then special teams meetings will probably start at 7:05. That will go for 30 minutes, and then you'll have offense and defense a breakdown for a 30-minute meeting, and then you'll come back and have a team meeting, which will go over the whole game plan, what the mindset needs to be going into playing Detroit Lions. And then you just break, and then you have curfew, depending on each team. But usually every team has 11 o'clock curfew, in your bed, lights off. And a lot of times guys are really focused. You're really excited for any game, but in particular to start off the NFL season. You don't envision any guys breaking any curfew. A lot of times guys just like to hang out and take their mind off the game because they're ready and they're focused and they're mentally and physically ready, that they don't want to overdo it and then, hang out until 11 o'clock. So it goes pretty quick. But then also after the game, as soon as the game's over, you hop on the bus, get on the plane, and lucky enough for the Vikings, hopefully they come back with a victory. And then also it's just a short 30, 40-minute flight. So that's a good thing, too, when you can fly back and get home quick after a game.
Yeah, you mentioned the excitement of guys probably aren't going to break curfew. Does that excitement before a first regular season game or a playoff game make it difficult to go to sleep at 11 o'clock and get the amount of rest you need before a game on Sunday?
To be honest with you, I never slept well before any game. I was so excited to play the game, and you're on edge. You want to go out there and compete, and better yet, you want to play well. You want to play well not only for yourself, but for the team and the organization, just that they've been believing in you for so long. So getting good a night's sleep is few and far between. If you get a good 5 or 6 hours, you'll be really happy with that, because the mindset of a player, and me personally, was no matter what I go through prior to that game, I can crank it up to whatever level I need to for those 3 hours or 4 hours I need to, just for the simple fact that I have a lot of pride in myself and also want to perform well for my teammates.
And when you look at the practice squad players, do they travel with the team?
No, the practice squad players do not travel with the team, so they are strictly practice squad guys. Sometimes they were called the taxi squad, where they're just practicing the other team's plays against the offense or defense, and obviously on special teams as well. They don't travel to the away games, but they do get to come to the home games. And they can be an asset, because if you have a lot of guys that have bought into showing an offense or defense a good rep, they can talk to the guys that they practiced against on their team about something that they see on the field, and obviously alert them to an adjustment or a check or a play that could be coming in the future. So when you have that whole team atmosphere, whether it's you're on the 45-man roster and the 53-man roster or the practice squad, that's when you're going to have a good team, because everybody's bought in for one goal.
For the game on Sunday, it's noon Central. For a game that starts at that time, what time do the players usually get to the stadium? And what did you do before games, and when did you hit the field for warm-ups?
I was the type of player, I usually like to get there, go through my routine, and I want to get on the field at the latest as possible. So there's 2 buses that will probably leave, depending on the commute to the stadium. One bus will probably leave at 9. There will be another one that leaves at 9:15 or 9:30. You're arriving maybe in 30-minute increments, so you get there around 9:30 or 10 o'clock. Then you usually go on to pregame warm-ups. Linebackers and defensive line and offensive linemen usually go on at the same time. So you go out there maybe 30 and 45 minutes before a game. You go through your warm-ups, and you go into team skeleton. You go through team inside and outside run, 5 or 6 plays, just to kind of warm up your pads. Then you break it down with the field goal and a punt. Then you run into the game, and you just wait for the game to start. And that's usually about 10 or 15 minutes before the game starts. So once you get to the stadium, it does accelerate. The process accelerates, but it's a process that sometimes can be slow and methodical. Just depends on the player. I was the type of player that I didn't like to get to the stadium and waste a lot of time. I kind of felt like I wanted to leave one section, which was the hotel, arrive at my stadium, which I viewed myself as a gladiator. And then once I stepped there into the stadium, it was my time to go to work.
And this weekend, the Vikings do have a challenge where they have to find a way to slow Matthew Stafford and Calvin Johnson in the Detroit Lions passing attack. How do you suggest they go about doing that?
Oh, well, Calvin Johnson, you're going to have to double team him. You're going to have him covered underneath, and then also you're going to have him covered over the top. And now where that's going to really hurt the defense is where the other 11 or 9 guys are going to have to be able to hold up. So you're going to have to run different coverages and different man schemes in order to take away everybody else, because they have a couple tight ends, and Scheffler That's pretty good. And then they also Reggie Bush now. So they have a lot more weapons. And also they have the old Viking Nate Burleson, who's a great number 2 receiver. And then Matthew Stafford, obviously, was throwing over 5,000 yards last year. So they have their work cut out for them. But I envision the Vikings getting after him pretty well on the pass rush. And they always play Detroit pretty tough. So I know it's going to be a closely fought game.
Well, you mentioned the new approach to this, and the Lions always play the Vikings tough, but Reggie Bush is on the team. What should they do to go about containing him as best they can?
Well, first and foremost, you got to get as many hats on Reggie as possible. You can't let him start the game off where he gets that confidence as an inside runner. The outside runner is where he's most dangerous, but once he gets that confidence as an inside runner, he's pretty hard to stop. And then also you just got to be very, very physical with him in the passing game, whether he's blocking or he's going out for a pass. You always have to be able to get your hands on him, get your pads on him within that 5-yard chuck rule range, and be very physical with him. And then when he does make his plays and gets his catches or his touches out of the backfield, you just got to make sure you wrap up and rally to him and contain him.
Well, Jay, there's a bit of controversy brewing elsewhere in the NFL, specifically in San Francisco, as quarterback Seneca Wallace has said that Jim Harbaugh and the 49ers used him to leverage a pay cut out of the other backup quarterback in San Francisco, Colt McCoy, and then cut Seneca Wallace. While few know the actual situation, have you seen NFL teams take this approach to squeeze a player's salary downward?
Oh, yeah, it happens almost every year. They'll bring guys in just to compete with another player just to make sure that he will go into training camp and play harder, and they have no intention on keeping the guy that they brought in. I've been in that situation where I don't know why I went out there, but I went out to the Oakland Raiders for training camp. They really didn't have any intention for keeping me except for to push Danny Clark, which I outperformed them in the preseason. But, you know, teams do stuff like that all the time. They're always trying to get an edge. It's oddly enough that Seneca Wallace is now with the Packers, and obviously he knows a little bit about the 49ers playbook, and they're playing here in the first week. So it's very interesting how teams make moves and why they do things. But then also there is some bad blood between the 49ers and the Packers because, let's face it, the 49ers got after the Packers pretty well last year in the playoffs.
Well, they play them in week 1, and now all of a sudden the 49er fans are crying conspiracy, saying now Seneca Wallace signed with the Packers to be Aaron Rodgers' backup. And it led to the question of, you know, maybe not with Seneca Wallace because he's a pretty veteran quarterback, been around, so it's good for the Packers to have somebody like that behind them. But is it common for NFL teams to go out and pick up a player from a team they're about to play to try to get some type of secrets out of them? And if so, what's that look like when that player gets to that team?
Well, people always ask who was my favorite team to play for, and I always tell them, and it's kind of funny, I always tell them it's whoever was paying me, and that's the honest to God truth. When you're signed by another team, that is who you're loyal to. That's who you want to see succeed because they brought you in for a reason. When you play against your old opponent or your old team, you just go in there and you tell them tendencies on players. You give them kind of an in-depth scouting report on each player, whether it's offense, defense, or special teams. Then also you give a scouting report on the coaches and the coaching staff and their philosophy on playing. Another thing that they do is you tell them about any plays that could affect the team that you're on, and the coaches will ask, how would they attack this certain type of play? How do they run this certain type of coverage? And that's about it. Now, does it give you a little bit of advantage? Maybe so, but let's face it. During the game, they don't get a chance to wait for the play call and for the player to tell them that this is coming. The players have to take with the notes that they got, use it, put it in their memory bank, and go out there and perform. So it's an advantage, but it's not a big advantage.
Well, this past week on a little bit different situation, the NFL settled a suit from the retired players for $750 million. And frankly, with 4,550 ex-players as plaintiffs in the suit, the settlement figure seemed a bit low. What are your thoughts about the agreement?
Oh, you know, I have to read the language. I think it's, you know, at first glance, I think it's a little bit of smoke and mirrors because I think that it's going to be interesting to see the process that they're going to make the players go through just to get their money. There's some players that are, you know, obviously stricken with illness and obviously concussion issues right now, and then it might be a 6 or 9 month process or maybe even a year before you see a dime. So it's going to be interesting how fast it accelerates now. The number, yeah, it's kind of low when you think of, you know, I think if you spread it out evenly, it's 176,000. Now it comes down to, well, if I'm feeling these symptoms now versus 5 years, do I hedge my bets to wait later, or do I go after it now and then you miss out on the money later? because all the money might be gone. So it'll be interesting to see how it is moving forward. It was a step in the right direction. I was very surprised that they came to a conclusion. So that's good for the players like myself that have had some serious issues with it. But it'll be interesting to see how it is moving forward when the smoke settles, to see what is really factual and what's perception out there.
Well, as you get to know it a little bit better, we may revisit in the season and see what we think about it. And again, we'll start to see people and how they apply for the benefits. Well, I'm going to close with just your thoughts on the season in general as we get ready to open for 2013. Who do you see as the teams to beat in the AFC and the NFC? And do you have any surprise teams in each conference? Either somebody you think is going to be better than people expect, or somebody who's not going to be as good as they're predicting out there?
In the AFC, I look at the Houston Texans is going to be one of the teams to beat. I think they have a lot of depth. I think they've learned from their lesson from New England last year. Oddly enough, I think the New England Patriots are still going to be the team that everybody's going to measure themselves against in the AFC, and let alone not the AFC, but the whole NFL. I think they're going to play well just because their division is a little bit weak. They still have Tom Brady, and that's all you need. The surprise team in the AFC, which I don't really foresee as being a surprise, but I think the Cincinnati Bengals is going to finally take that step forward in that AFC North, and I think they're going to win the division. I think they're going to go deep into the playoffs because I think they've obviously lost the Houston Texans twice. I think they're a better team this year. They've added some guys to free agency and in the draft. I think they're focused. And I think they're going to be a team that everybody's going to be surprised how how much better they've gotten since last year. And the NFC, it's every other year thing with the Giants. I'm a big Tom Coughlin fan, big Giants fan. So I'm going to pick them to be one of the teams to beat. Then also I'm going to go with the San Francisco 49ers. And the Seattle Seahawks. So whoever is standing after that divisional race, I think that's going to be the team to beat in the NFC. The only thing that could hurt those two teams is that they beat each other up so much getting to the playoffs that they might not be able to last throughout the playoffs. And then the NFC, as far as the surprise team, I'm going to go down to the South. I think it's going to be the New Orleans Saints. Obviously, with Sean Payton coming back, everybody's going to be excited and know he brings a unique quality as far as leadership and play calling as a head coach. But I think they're going to play a lot better as far as defensively and how they're going to do things and move forward, how they're going to be able to go and win a lot of games this year.
Well, that brings a close to the regular season preview edition of Jay Foreman's All-Out-Blitz, and Jay will return next week on VikeFans.com to look back on the game against the Detroit Lions and preview the Vikings game against the Chicago Bears at Soldier Field. So until next week, I'm Tom Moore.
And I'm Jay Foreman.
So long, everyone.